Hey Meeple people, and on today's vlog, we are going to be playing Guildmaster by Good Games Publishing. Let the rivalry begin.
As the master of a new adventurers guild, you compete with rival guilds to earn the most fame in a fantasy world of intrigue and rising threats. Over 9 rounds, you secretly and simultaneously order teams of adventurers to complete a limited number of objectives on the main board. Combine adventurers' abilities and skills to complete increasingly difficult contracts, which gain you gold and fame. You also recruit more powerful adventurers and hire builders to upgrade your guild's ability to do more orders with bigger teams. But resources are limited, and your rival guilds plot to get what they need too. Your teams may have to conflict or negotiate and cooperate with rivals to share the spoils. You may also miss out on some objectives entirely, so plan your orders carefully, weighing up risks and rewards, and work with and against your rivals as you compete to become the most famous guild in the land.
Hello Meeple people, welcome to our vlog. Sarah, what are we playing today?
Today we're going to be playing Guildmaster by Good Games Publishing. They sent us this copy for the channel. Thank you so much. This is a game for 2 to 4 players that I would describe as kind of a worker placement game in disguise. It is all about being a guild master for rival guilds and attempting to grow your guild by recruiting new adventurers to join and by sending your adventurers on sort of like quests where we'll go for points and money and all kinds of cool
Fame
stuff.
and acclaim and glory!
Exactly. So it's a little bit complicated of a game. I'm just going to give you sort of an overview of what's going on in the game. This is by no means exhaustive, so this is not a learn to play. If you want to know how to play this game, this will give you a little bit of a taste, but you will not know exactly how to play this game until
This is to spark your interest, to get you the hype train.
Exactly. So the game is played over a series of 9 rounds, and at the end of 9 rounds, whoever has acquired the most fame for their guild wins. So we're going to track our fame around this scoreboard right here. At the end of 9 rounds, whoever has the most wins. So the way that it works is, like I said, there are 9 rounds, and we're going to track those rounds over here on this round tracker right here. At the start of the game, we start with this moon token in its...
Half moon.
I can't remember if it's waxing or waning. I don't remember which one this is, but it's sort of in this half moon part of its cycle. And that is going to indicate to us a few different things. The moon cycle is going to affect the costs of certain things. It's also going to affect some of our characters' abilities, and it may affect other things throughout the game as well. So when the round changes, when we go from round 1 to round 2, we're actually going to flip this token over to the full moon, and then the prices and the abilities and all like that change based on the full moon prices. So in round 1, this character right here is he costs $5 because it was a half moon. But in round 2, when it's a full moon, he's actually going to cost $6 to recruit. So as the rounds change, so does the cycle of the moon, and that indicates, like I said, the different things that are going to happen throughout the game, and different prices and abilities and that kind of stuff. Additionally, every 3rd round of the game, whatever phase the moon would be in, works just the same as before, but also we are now having a blood moon. And blood moons only happen 3 times throughout the game, but they're going to give us some extra cards for each player, and then they're also going to sort of work as like a way to clear off some of the stuff.
Freshen it up.
Exactly, sitting around for a couple of rounds possibly. So this moon token will continue to flip over and progress down the track as we play the game. And as we hit those different blood moon phases and the different phases of the moon and that kind of stuff, it will sort of change up how the game is played. So each round of the game, what is going to happen is there'll be a little bit of bookkeeping at the very beginning of each round where we're sort of just getting some administrative work done. And then what's going to happen is we are going to each secretly send our adventurers out on certain orders. So here's my order board, and on it we are going to see that I have 4 possible orders that I could send my team on. Now, at the very beginning of the game, I only have the ability to send out adventurers on 2 orders each round. So initially I could only send my adventurers to do 2 different orders, and in order to get orders 3 and 4 sort of unlocked, I would have to upgrade my stables. So what's going to happen is I'm going to assign adventurers and possibly some resources and that kind of stuff to these different order locations in an attempt to complete orders. And there are different sort of things that I could do. The very first thing that would be resolved each order is the building. So I can send resources and adventurers to get builders, which are going to allow me to sort of upgrade my guild hall by giving it different buildings that are going to help me. So for example, if I decided to send adventurers here to hire builders, then I could build any of these upgrades to my guild hall here or here. And the way that they work is they have a cost. All of the buildings have a cost. For example, the mess hall has a building cost of 1 worker. So in order for me to build this mess hall 2, I would have to hire 1 worker, which would cost me $3. When I hire that worker, the price goes up. So the next person to build something is going to have to pay potentially a little bit more. So if I were to build my mess hall, I would cover over my starting mess hall with this one. Now I can send more adventurers out each round. If, for example, the next person wanted to build the stables, they would have to hire 2 workers to build the stables. And they would have to pay $3 for the first worker and $4 for the next worker. So in total, to build their stables, it would cost them $7. And they would move this up here. And the cost for workers increases over the course of each round, but resets at the end of each round. So it sort of shows the fluctuating costs based on supply and demand of workers being hired throughout sort of each round, which I think is really cool. So you can build these upgrades to your guild hall, and they're going to let you do different things. For example, the stables here is, like I said, what dictates that we can only prepare and carry out 2 orders every round. If I upgraded my stables, I could potentially carry out 3 or even 4 orders each round. The mess hall is going to allow me to assign different members of my guild to each task. So when we start the game, we can only assign 2 adventurers to each task, so they sort of go out like in a team of up to 2 adventurers. But if I were to upgrade my mess hall, then I could send more adventurers with each team. And then finally, the bar is going to allow me to generate more income when I upgrade my bar. There's also a starting piece for each player where we get some dice manipulation based on skill checks that we'll attempt to perform in the game. And I'll talk about these skill checks a little bit later in this sort of overview. But you can buy more of these and they're available right over here. Now you can never have the same thing even if it would show a different side. So since I already have a might, I cannot acquire this other might, even though if I were to flip it over, this would be different than my current ability, but I can't have both of them. So I could get some logic or some spirit or some arcane, and I would add these to my guild hall here after paying the cost for building them, just like I would with an upgrade. I choose which side I want this to be on, so kind of which result or which ability it would give me, and then I build that into my guild hall as well. And now I have this ability for the remainder of the game. Pretty much every time you build something, you'll also get victory points. And throughout the game, there are numerous ways to get victory points. Anytime you see this laurel wreath with the victory point symbol here, that is going to be points that you generate pretty much immediately. There's only one thing that doesn't generate points immediately, but would generate points for you later. And that is the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is this right here. Now, each of these is available to be built once per game. And when it's built, a player would build it over the top of their guild hall like this. And it's sort of like the dome or the ceiling of their guild hall. Now, this is going to generate points for me at the end of the game based on whatever it says here. For example, this one gives me 1 point for each adventurer in my guild. So the adventurers that I have in my guild, plus the ones that I'm able to recruit throughout the game, are all going to get me end of game points if I have this upgrade built at the end of the game. And when players build these, they just do the same thing. They assign their adventurers to hire builders, they pay the cost, and then they build this right over the top of their guild hall. So that's the sort of first area where you can send workers, is to hire builders to build different things around your guild hall. The second location are these spots here. And in this game, we are not going to be playing with this section here because that's for a higher player count. But in our game, we're going to be playing with these 5 spots here. And essentially this would be where we recruit new adventurers to join our guild. In order to do this, we'll have to pay the cost based on the phase of the moon. And we'll also have to be the player who got to that location uncontested. And I will talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But essentially what happens is if you go to this location and you're the only person who was interested in recruiting this particular adventurer, then you pay the cost and you add this character to your hand. That's also going to get you some end of game points, and then it will increase the skills that your guild members are sort of capable of so that when you go on like quests to perform contracts, which I'll talk about in a bit, then you'll have more skills available to you based on what your workers can do, your adventurers can do. Okay, so that's this section here. Now, an interesting thing about this section here is that in order to hire sort of the next level of adventurer, you have to have the lower level adventurer in your guild already. So for example, we start with some novices. The next step in rank order would be these adepts. And in order for me to hire an adept, I just have to have a novice on my team and be able to pay the cost. So I would hire the adepts next, and then once I have at least one adept on my team, I can hire the heroes. Once I have at least one hero on my team, I can hire the legendary heroes, or sorry, the legends. But I can't just straight up hire a legend or even a hero if I don't have the previous sort of rank in my guild already. And this is another area where I think they did a really nice job sort of incorporating the theme with the mechanics, because if you think about it, like when we're just starting out, we just have like these novice adventurers. A legendary hero is not going to be attracted to our guild, right? They're just like, that's just a bunch of noobs. Like, it's not good enough for me to pay any attention to. But if we start to generate some attention, then maybe slightly, more skilled adventurers will come and join our guild, and they'll attract slightly more skilled adventurers and so on. And then eventually, we have a guild with like legendary adventurers in it. So that's this section here. This would happen next. And then the final section would be this section here, which is the contract section. This is actually the sort of adventures that we'd be sending our adventurers out to try to accomplish. And these are all going to generate rewards in the form of money and points. And then sometimes they'll also generate abilities that we can use. In order to attempt these contracts, we have to send members of our guild that have related skills. So for example, the members of my guild have different skills here, and none of them have this symbol right here. So there's no way for me to achieve this particular contract right now. So that's not a contract that I would want to go after. But a couple of them do have this one. And so I have a pretty good shot at actually attempting and achieving this one right here. So if I decided to send some of my adventurers to attempt this contract and they succeeded, then I would get this contract. It would give me some money and some victory points, and then it would also give me some ability that I may be able to use immediately, maybe later in the game. And then there are ones that would happen at different rounds of the game as well. So let's talk a little bit about how you actually send adventurers to do these things, because that's an interesting part of the game as well. Like I said, it kind of feels like a worker placement game, but instead of using like a worker that you'd actually place somewhere in order to do the worker placement aspect of the game, we're going to be using this order board, which we would normally have behind our screens. And then these cards right here. And there's a card for pretty much every location. So what you would do is, let me reset this a little bit so I can show you. Okay, so what you would do is at the start of the game, when we are sort of novice adventurers without much going on in our guild, we are allowed to, at most, attempt to complete 2 orders with 2 adventurers sort of going after each of those orders. So what would happen is I would select a location that I would like to attempt to achieve, right? So for example, if I wanted to attempt to recruit this gentleman right here, then I would find the related card. He's on location A, right? So I would find the related card A, and I would add that to my order board, sort of in priority order, right? If I thought that he was paramount to my team, then I would really want that to be a priority. So I would put that in my order 1 spot. Order 1 is going to be resolved before any other order. So hopefully by putting him here, I will get to achieve hiring him on. I'm also going to place anything else needed in order to recruit him. So for him, if this were a half moon phase, it would cost $5 for me to hire him. So in addition to my card, which indicates that that's what I'm attempting to do, I would also add $5 here to sort of pay his recruitment fees. I would also add any characters that are necessary to perform an action. So for example, if I wanted to attempt one of these contracts, let's say that I wanted to attempt that one that I talked about previously, I would send whatever workers that I'm going to send. Now they're at location 3, so I would find my location 3 card and I would put that in my order 2 section along with any adventurers that are going to attempt that. And then if they needed anything to do that, like if they needed money or anything like that, then I would also add that to this section here. Once I have my order board sort of completed, I know where I'm going and what I'm doing when I get there. And again, we have to abide by all of our restrictions, right? I can only prepare 2 orders. So even though I'd like to do more stuff right now, this is all I can do. I can only send 2 adventurers per team, so I couldn't send any more to go with these guys. So once we've got our order board prepared, we will, remember, we've done this behind our screen. Once our order board is prepared, we'll take this ribbon right here and we'll drape it over the front of our guild hall to sort of visually indicate to the other players that we're ready for the next step. When all players are ready for the next step, we will remove our screens and reveal the orders that we've given our guild, and then we'll attempt to carry them out. So we're going to start with order 1, and every player will resolve their first order. So my first order was to hire this gentleman right here. If I'm uncontested, if nobody else's first order was to hire this gentleman here, then I hire him and we move on. If there was a contest, if 2 or more players wanted to do the same thing in the same order, then we'd have to resolve that based on what thing it was that they wanted to do. There are different things you can do, like you can build, like I said, you can recruit, you can attempt contracts, and it kind of depends on which one of those, how it would be resolved if there were conflicts. However, if there were conflicts, then players would resolve those, and then whoever wins the conflict would get to take that thing. So if we had a conflict over this here, we would resolve that, and whoever won the conflict would actually get to be the one to recruit this person here. If you lose a contest over a particular location, you don't get to do that thing, right? So if Nick and I contested this location here and Nick won the contest, he would get this character recruited to his guild, and then I wouldn't get anything. So there's a portion at the end of each round where if you had an adventurer who wasn't able to perform their duties, or if you had adventurers that you didn't actually assign a duty, but you had an order spot available for them and you had extra adventurers just kind of sitting around your guild hall, you could send them out to wander. And as they wander, they would get to sort of achieve different things based on a die result. So what happens is we resolve order 1 all together, right? And the conflicts are dealt with if there are any. Then we move on to order 2, and we would resolve order 2 again in order. So I wanted to go to the contract section, location 3, and I wanted to attempt this contract. As long as nobody else went there, I could attempt to complete this contract. If somebody else did want to go there, we could determine if we wanted to cooperate together to achieve this contract or not. And this would be an interesting part of the game, which I honestly don't think is going to come up very much in a 2-player game, where there would be some negotiation that would sort of enter into play. And the negotiation can be basically whatever you want, and you can even be untruthful about it if you want. But what's going to happen is if players enter into negotiations because multiple players wanted to complete the same contract, they'll negotiate, but then what's actually going to determine whether or not they agree to those terms or not is, this token right here. So it has this green side or this red side. So if Nick and I were in conflict over a contract, I could say, well, hey, I'll work with you and I'll split the take with you 50-50. But I could be lying about that, right? I could just be like, yeah, right, I'm not going to give you anything. But to your face, I said that I would work with you. So this token is actually going to indicate what your actual alignment is, no matter what you said in negotiations. And if you said that you'd cooperate, then you cooperate and you sort of abide by the guidelines that you laid out in your negotiations. But if you decided that you were not going to cooperate, then it falls to a contested skill check, which means that you'd have to do a skill check at a bit of a disadvantage. But if you get it, then you get the thing and you don't have to share. Okay, so I feel like we've talked about most everything that you're going to see in the game. I didn't talk a lot about the skill checks, but essentially what it would be, it's actually pretty interesting. So let's say that Nick and I were not going to contest this, right? Nick didn't want to go to this location. He wanted to do something else. So I was the only person who went here. And these are the adventurers that I sent to attempt to complete this contract right here. So they need 7 or more of this particular symbol here in order to succeed at this contract here. This gentleman is bringing 3 to the table and she is bringing 1 to the table. I would grab some dice off to the side here equal to the number of the total of the symbol that I need. So he's bringing 3, she's bringing 1, I get 4 dice. The color of the dice doesn't matter. So even though I'm attempting this sort of red skill check here, I don't need to use the red dice. They're all just standard 6-sided die. I can use whichever ones I grab first. So I've grabbed these 4. I'm using 4 dice and I'm attempting a 7 or better. So I'm going to roll these and hopefully I will get 7 or more pips on my dice. Let's do just pretend. That's even worse. There we go. All right. So in this case here, I would have achieved at least 7. So I would succeed in my contract. I would get the rewards and the abilities and that kind of thing. And that would be that. Now, that, I think, is pretty much the basics of Guildmaster, excuse me. So like I said, there's kind of a lot going on and there are a lot of little details here and there that I didn't cover. But at least now you kind of understand what we're doing and maybe why we're doing it, and hopefully it gives you a little bit better understanding of the game and whether or not you might like it. Would you like to get to it, Nick?
Yeah, let's get to it. And then just one last thing, after you've like gotten things off of it and gotten contracts, you'll go into the last phase where you'll just refresh everything.
Yes.
Yep. So yeah, let's get into it, and we'll talk to you guys in a bit and see where we're at during our mid-game of Guildmaster by Good Games Publishing. All right, talk to you guys in a sec. Toodles! Hey, Amiibo people. So, Sarah, how's it going so far?
It's going well. So we are just about to head into the 6th round of 9.
So a little bit more than halfway.
A little bit more than halfway. But things are going well. We've started to recruit more adventurers into our guilds. We've started to gain a little bit more skilled adventurers. So like I have a hero. And then I also have an adept, and I, fingers crossed, will be getting a legend very soon. So that's like the highest level of adventurer that you can recruit into your guild. I've also built some infrastructure. I have a pretty nice bar in my guild hall. It's the best highest level bar that you can possibly have, so it generates a lot of income for me at each round. I've also upgraded my stables a little bit. I've gone on a ton of quests already, so I think it's going pretty well over here for my, I don't know, the Mermaid Guild, whatever I am. How's it going over there for Medusa's Guild?
We're actually called the Serpent Guild, but it really does look like Medusa's Guild. But yeah, so it's going all right. I got some characters, and yeah, we're just we're chugging along, but not on them points. Them points are looking very there's a nice little gap right there.
There's a nice little gap. About 18 points, I think.
18 points?
Yeah, I think so.
Really?
Yep, I think
That does not look like 18 points to me.
This, oh no, it's not. That's 10. So this is going to be 9. 9-point gap.
Still, not too terribly great, so. All right, well, yeah, I'm chugging along. And
it's an 8-point gap.
It's an 8-point gap?
Sorry.
But yeah, so I'm enjoying it so far. There's a lot going on the board, and a lot just going on in this game with a lot.
There is, but I think like once you get used to it, you can go through it pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a learning curve to this game.
A small one.
A small one. But once you kind of get over that learning curve, you are just chugging through this game. Because last night,
especially like 2 players, I think with 3 or 4, it could get a little bit more complex. Because the more players you have, the more potential for like crossover, where more than one player ends up wanting to do the same thing at the same time, which can complicate and like sort of draw out the process. With 2 players, even though they've reduced the number of spaces, like we can't go here and we can't go here or here. So even though they've reduced the number of potential areas where we could, go, we're still not running into each other a ton. Yeah. So we're getting to pretty much do what we want when we want, without like tripping each other up too much.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think if we were like more,
with more players, I think that would happen a lot more.
Yeah, or if we were more competitive players, or players who liked more like head-to-head sort of combat.
Or even liked the same kind of strategies, because if you had the same kind of strategy, then you could bump heads more.
Exactly.
But there's definitely, in this game, with more players, the game does become vastly different.
I think so, especially because, like I was talking about at the beginning of the thing, there's a whole section about like the negotiations and stuff like that, and only one time so far in this game has a situation even come up where I was like, hey, maybe we should work together to try to address this right here, and Nick couldn't. He couldn't even
like I wanted to, but the thing was like I really couldn't, because there was an event that affected both of us in a bad way, and like it stopped us from getting our income, and so we were like we don't like that at all. But yeah, so we wanted to go ahead and kind of knock that one out the park so we can just go, but we couldn't even negotiate that. So yeah, I think it's going good. We got probably some things to talk about at the end, like final thought type stuff about the game. But so far, we're kind of trugging along, and Sarah's kicking me in the face. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's a good time.
I'm definitely liking our this playthrough more than I enjoyed our initial playthrough, which was sort of like our practice round, make sure we understand everything, that kind of stuff before we started filming. I'm enjoying this game more than I enjoyed the first one. I feel like, now that I kind of know how everything works, now that I kind of understand the overarching strategies of the game, that kind of stuff, I'm enjoying myself more than I did that first time around. And it's going a lot faster than I expected it to.
Yeah.
The box time says 60 to 90 minutes. Maybe if we were playing with 3 or 4 players, it may take that long, but I think with 2, it might take an hour, maybe. But if you're really chugging along, I don't even think it'll take quite that long.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get back into it and see how this finishes out, and we will see who the winner and the loser is. Not
We'll see.
right. We'll see.
An 8-point lead is not like anything you can't come back from.
It's still an 8-point lead, but
maybe if all of my entire guild decide to take naps and stop going on quests, then maybe.
Sure. I know you run your guild, Sarah. You work them.
Mm-hmm.
You don't let them slack. All right. Well, we'll get back to you guys in a second here. Toodles. And welcome back, Meeple people. We are at the end of our game of Guild Master. And I totally blew it, hardcore. She is the established ultimate guild, and I was that failed startup.
I am the guild master. I have
You are the
mastered
guild
the
master.
guild. So, yeah, it was interesting. We've played through a full game. So this is actually our second game. We played a practice game before this, and there's a variant in the rules that you can use for a shorter game where you only play 6 of the 9 rounds. So we did that for our practice game, and then this game we played through the whole 9 rounds. I think that playing through the 6 rounds was good if you are looking for a shorter game, but I would prefer to play with the 9 rounds because at 6 rounds, I feel like things are just starting to really ramp up. And
also, for 2 players, you're already taking away some things, and with the shortened round, it just seems like it goes by really fast, and you really don't get the feel of the game.
Yeah, I feel like with 9 rounds, you get everything gets well fleshed out, and you get to sort of experience everything that the game has to offer, and you feel like you've really built up your guild and that kind of thing. So I would recommend maybe it's the same thing. Maybe play through the shortened game if you're gonna do a practice game or kind of just get used to
just get the feel for it.
But then go ahead and play a full game if you like it, because you do get a slightly different feel playing with the full game because you just have a little bit more time. There's 3 more rounds for you to kind of continue to build up your guild and go on the quests and that kind of thing. What did you think overall, Nick?
I enjoyed it. I lost, so I was at 65, and Sarah was over at 99. So yeah,
I wasn't gonna bring up the scores,
you know what?
But,
it's okay. I'm confident in my abilities of playing, but it was good. It just seemed not too much of a runaway leader issue. It just seemed like you have to roll dice, and the dice didn't really help out.
Yeah.
And then when you clashed and had to do contests, you had to roll. And we clashed, I think, 2 more times.
I think we clashed at least 2 or 3 times in this game.
And I totally got my face smashed. So,
but honestly, I think it was a fair fight to begin with. The dice just didn't go in your favor.
Well, I would have 1 die left or 1 die less, but then we would go ahead and roll, and I'd get a good roll. But then you rolled, and you just got 3 or 4 more.
So I think that's actually one of the interesting things about the game, right? Because what you're doing is you're assigning adventurers to these orders here, and frankly, it doesn't really matter which adventurers you assign to certain orders if you're trying to do certain things, right? If you're just trying to recruit a new guild member, if you want to build something or whatever, it really doesn't matter which members of your guild you send to do that, except if there's a conflict. Then if there's a conflict, you have to sort of pit the skills of the adventurers that you've sent to complete that order against the skills of the adventurer that your opponent has sent to do that. So it presents this sort of thoughtful place that you're like, okay, I'm going to go here and I'm going to try to build. And it's really important to me that I get to build before my opponent does, because I don't have enough money to build after them. Like if they build first, workers are going to cost too much and then I'm not going to be able to get to build. So it's really important to me that I get to build first. So then if you send a really strong team, if you do end up in a conflict, then you have a team that you can send that will hopefully hold their own against the competitor, right? So I do think that there is an interesting sort of point there to choosing which adventurers you send to do which tasks. Sometimes you have to send specific adventurers to do specific things, right? Like I wouldn't want to send someone to do this task if they didn't have any of these symbols, right? Like I would totally fail that task. So for that, I would want to send adventurers who can complete those sort of tasks. But for the ones where it doesn't really matter who you send, then you can kind of think as like a secondary line of thought, okay, well, if I do end up in a conflict, who's going to do well in that conflict? So I think that was, even though it didn't work out well for Nick, because I think I was being thoughtful about who I was sending for things. If they did get in a conflict, hopefully they were strong enough in their particular skill that they could win the conflict. And it did seem to work out for me most of the time. So I think even that there is some player agency in attempting to mitigate, the luck of the die where conflict resolution is considered in this game. Yeah. And that may not make a ton of sense until you play it, but I hope it does. Because I do think that's like kind of an interesting subplot, right? Like you're thinking about all these different things as you're playing, and I think that who you send to do certain things, especially when no particular skill is needed, it's still an interesting decision to make.
Yeah. So there is a little, I guess, what we were calling while we were discussing it, a little fat that could be kind of cut off from this game.
Yeah.
We had kind of an issue with the board, because the board had places to draw cards from, but then when you discard cards, there wasn't an area to discard, and so we had to like put it off the side, or since we were a 2-player game, we would like use this area
to do like discards.
And then we had this is the piles where everything was, and then we'd make our draw piles and then our discard piles behind that. And it just seemed like, well, why couldn't there just be space for it on the board? Why could the board just be shaped differently?
It's kind of a pet peeve of mine in board game design. It's not that big of a deal, right? But I feel like if you're going to have a board where you have to put cards or resources on the board as sort of like a sideboard type thing, right? Like this is a sideboard and it's offering all of these options and stuff like that. I feel like if you're going to do that, put space on there for everything that should be on there. So you have a draw pile, you should have room for a discard pile. If you have, multiple stacks of cards going on and you have a board specifically for those cards to be laid out, there should be a spot on the board for the draw decks for those. And I just feel like if you don't do that, you're giving players this thing that they have to use, right? We have to use this board because it has some information on there that we need. So we have to use this board, but it doesn't do everything that we need it to. So we're using the board, but then we're also having to use other areas around the table when everything could have just gone onto the board, or maybe they could have found some alternative way so that we didn't have to have a board, right? Now, in this case, I think we needed a board. I just think it probably should have been about 2, maybe 2.5 times bigger than it is right now. And they should have made areas for discard piles and maybe a couple of other little areas for you to put certain things.
Yeah, because I feel like even if it made the board bigger, I feel also it could have just like, because we got all this stuff on the side, maybe organize all this stuff so it would be, even like in Clank, where they had the market board.
Even something like that would have been
even
nice,
if it was a couple of boards where one had the cards and another had all the upgrades, because we had the upgrades over there, and then we had some upgrades over in this area.
It's not that big of a deal, right? It's not that big of a deal to have things on the table.
Yeah.
That's fine. But if you're going to make me put some things on a board and then some things that relate to those things off the board, like these cards right here, like here's one of these cards right here. So you draw it off of this stack right here and you put it on the board. Well, but then if you discard it, then it's off the board again. Or if you had to draw from it, it's off the board again. But this one is all on the board. And it just feels to me like in addition to what we're sort of complaining about here, there were a couple other little things where it was like, if they would have just sort of streamlined a few things, or maybe cleaned up a few things from the components, or from like a component standpoint. They could have maybe made a slightly more streamlined design. And I think that could have really made this game not more fun or better or anything like that necessarily. Just it would have made it work better, in my opinion.
Like the flow would have been better. And
that being said, though, I did think it was a lot of fun, especially our second game when we kind of knew what we were doing a little bit more. It's got like this weird sort of mesh of all these different mechanics. You're kind of doing like a deck builder, right? Because you're like building up your team of adventurers. So that's got like this sort of a deck buildery feel to it. You're
worker placement.
You're doing like sort of like this worker placement thing. And I think the mechanics and the theme mesh really, really well together. I think they did a phenomenal job of pulling the theme through the mechanics. And I think that you really can get the feel that, like, you know, you're this guild of adventurers and your guild is like steadily improving over time, and you're attracting, you know, better and better talent and skill to your guild as you go on these different quests.
And you're upgrading your guild so you can do more things, and you can make sure that you will complete the quests and the contracts and all the good stuff.
So I think it was tons of fun. I think, like we said, I feel like if they would have maybe just cleaned up a few things that don't even have anything to do necessarily with like mechanics or even like the theme or strategies or anything, just kind of like the general like facilitation of the game. If they would have just cleaned up a few things on that aspect. Another example was that we had these player screens that you're supposed to use to cover up your order boards. So throughout the game, you put these player screens here, and then you like do things on your order boards. And then when everybody's ready, you're supposed to put this ribbon over your screen here to show like, okay, I'm ready. When everybody's ribbons are there, you take all this away and you reveal your order board, and then you carry out the orders, you know, that everybody has prepared. I think the screen, honestly, like as soon as we turned off the camera, I just threw my screen aside. And
I did the same thing.
I was like, Nick, don't look at my stuff. I'm going to do stuff, and you do stuff, and we'll both do stuff, and we won't use the screen. It was just too big and bulky, and it took up too much room. And I was always like trying to like look over the top of it so I could see the board and everything. And then like trying to work behind it was frustrating. And I've played games with screens before, and it usually doesn't bother me too much. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's too tall or what, or if there's like, maybe I'm trying to like fit too much stuff behind it or whatever. But I just felt like the screen was really prohibitive to me, sort of like playing smoothly and like kind of being less frustrated about things. So I just ditched it, and I was like, just don't look at my stuff, and I won't look at your stuff, and we won't bother.
And you know, we were playing things even face down sometimes. Like that's what I was doing. You were playing your stuff face up, and I wasn't looking over there, but I was coming over here and with my stuff and just playing it face down. And then when we were ready, we would reveal each thing. And it was frustrating because like there was a lot of information on the back of it, which is also like, okay, well, you can't make it smaller because then the text will get smaller.
The way that I used this was like a giant player aid, right?
Yeah.
So like Nick is right. It's got all this information on there, some of which was really helpful as we played through the game. But I just kind of, like I said, I just kind of set it off to the side. And then if I needed to reference something, then I would just kind of glance over at it like a big player aid.
Yeah. And I really do think this is one of the better player aids that I've interacted in board games.
To be honest, I think there's too much stuff on it to be a really, really useful player aid. There are pieces of information that are really useful. Like, for example, this chart right here. I referenced this chart several times throughout the game.
Because that's when you go wandering.
Yeah, so this chart was really useful. But like, for example, I didn't read anything over here. Not once. Never once did I need anything over here. And like, I didn't look at anything over here. So I think there's a little bit too much information on it to be like a genuinely great player aid. And to my point that like trying to fit too much stuff behind there, the thing is, this is the only thing that you have to really put behind your player aid. But because you have so much other stuff going on,
the whole table is already cluttered with everything. It's hard to, you know.
It's so, and because I'm trying to keep all of my stuff like so I can see everything, then to make it so that just this was behind my player aid meant that like everything else had to be like pushed even further out, and then it was even further spread out, and then I'm like, trying to, so I just felt like the player aid to me was more frustrating than it should have been. And because I kind of recognized that it was going to be like that, I just stopped playing with it. I was just like, I don't want to play with this. I'm just going to, if Nick like happens to glance over here or whatever he does, but I'd rather that happen than have to try to contend with this player aid the whole time.
Yeah.
So things like that, things like the communication ribbon to, tell everybody that you're ready, like that's cool. And I think if we're playing with more players, it would probably be something that I would feel would be useful, because it would allow players to sort of gently say like, hey, I'm ready, without having to put any pressure on anybody else. Because you can put this ribbon on there yourself.
And you can look around while you're doing your turn, and you can be like, okay, well, I'm the last one.
Yeah, or you can be like, okay, that person's not ready yet, so I have a little bit more time, kind of thing. Yeah. So I think that this is nice, but maybe for a higher player count. But that and the player screens, Nick and I just like didn't play with at all. Yeah.
But I mean, with that negative, there was just, like we said earlier, a lot of positive within the gameplay, and it was
don't let our little hang-ups on these minor issues deter you from the game if it seemed like something you might enjoy, because there were a lot of neat things going on in this game, and there were a lot of fun things that players could do.
I think going on the contracts, it was kind of like, going on your own when you don't have to compete with somebody. It was kind of nice. But like we said, we only played with 2 players. And once it gets up to 3 or 4 players, the game does and will drastically change, because you're adding more to the board. And,
and you're also adding
interactions with other players, because there's probably more conflicts with who wants to do what. Yeah. And I mean, it happened, a handful of times in our game, but in a 4-player game, oh my gosh,
But I do think, I really enjoyed, probably 90% of this game I really enjoyed. So the 10% of stuff that I'm kind of, griping about, if it sounds like it would be interesting to you, just kind of ignore that for now. Just maybe go into it knowing that, maybe for you, that'll be a negative like it was for us. But if it doesn't sound like something that would bother you, or if the rest of the game sounds like something that you might enjoy, then I would absolutely give it a try, because for me, I had a lot of fun with this, and aside from these sort of fiddly little bits that don't even really have much to do with the gameplay itself, that are just kind of extra sort of outside forces, that aside from those little things, I really, really enjoyed this.
Yeah, because even though I lost really bad, there were things okay, well, I need to do this different next time, I need to do that. And there's a lot of games that, kind of lay that out there, that you need to change up your strategy. But I feel like in this one, you can definitely play really different in each game, which is nice, because then the replayability is not just, there's not just a lot there. There's a lot of depth to that replayability. It's not just, oh, I'm going to try this and it's going to be like that. But in this game, you can try something different. You can be like, whoa, this will be... Even the characters. The characters will definitely change up your games.
Yeah, that was one thing that I don't think I tapped into very effectively at all.
Me either.
Was that, you can see that not each, but some of the characters have different abilities, which can be triggered in different phases of the game. And I was not particularly good at paying attention to these. So this one right here, every time there was a full moon during the plot phase of that round, then I could do this ability right here. And then this one, same thing. Every time there was a half moon during the plot phase, I could do this ability right here. And then this guy right here, this lady right here, excuse me, every time we had an action phase, I could do this right here. So there were a lot of things. And then
there's a blood moon phase too.
Yeah, there's the blood moon phase where you can do special things. We also had our guilds, and depending on how you'd upgraded your guild, or what upgrades you had chosen to add into your guild, you had a lot of sort of dice mitigation, rolling mitigation, or you could expand your options for how many adventurers you could send on every quest, or how much money you got, or that kind of thing. So there's kind of a lot going on in this game, and it is a little bit spastic. just a little bit, but it's highly, highly thematic. A lot of it makes sense based on the theme, right? Like we were doing this thing with the moon, the phases of the moon, and like I said, that would kind of affect your characters and how they could act at like different times, right? So like that was really cool. The builders, every time you built anything, you would have to increase the value of the builders so that the next time someone wanted to hire builders, it would cost more. And I feel like that really captures the feel of like, supply and demand in a market. And having like you could only, hire an adventurer who was one step above any current member of your guild. So like when you start out with these novices, the only adventurers you can hire are the adepts.
And then you go to the heroic.
Yeah, and then once you've got at least one adept in your guild, then you can hire a heroic hero, I think, right? Yeah, hero. And then once you have at least one hero in your guild, then you can hire a legend. And I feel like that was, highly thematic as far as like, a legend is not going to be attracted to some startup little guild with like a bunch of novices in it, right? They're probably going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to mess with that. They don't even know what they're doing yet. But if your guild has been like gaining notoriety and doing really well on quests and missions and that kind of thing, then you're going to start to attract adventurers of like higher skills and better abilities and that kind of stuff. So I feel like there were so many points in this game where the theme was permeated through the mechanics. It just really, really great marriage between the mechanics and the theme here. And there were a lot of moments that were just really cool or really fun. And I think if they would just clean up a few sort of edge case things, just sort of trim some fat off, like Nick said at the beginning, then what they would have left behind is an excellent game.
Well, all right, that's a lot to take in. This is one of probably our longer vlogs. I mean, because this is hefty. He's right, yeah. Even our cat, he's screaming and he's like, yeah, this is a hefty game, guys. You've been at the table, not petting me and giving me kibbles.
Actually, I'm sure you might have noticed, we had sat down and we recorded like the initial thing, and then when we finished that, we actually left and we went and got some dinner, and then we came back and sat down and actually continued to play, just because it took so long to record the initial part of the vlog and then to get started playing, that we needed a dinner break in between. But the box time on the game does say 60 to 120 minutes. I would say if you're playing with 2 players, it's probably going to be on the lower end of that. So maybe like 60 minutes or so. Obviously, if you're playing with more players, though, I think it'll take longer.
Yeah. All right. Well, we hope you all enjoyed this vlog of Guildmaster by Good Games Publishing, and we thank them again for sending this copy over for us to check out and make a vlog of it. Well, until next time, we'll talk to you guys later. Toodles!